The scent of betrayal clung to James like a shroud. It was a bitter, metallic tang that had replaced the sweet, familiar comfort of his family's home. Now, the sterile air of a place he was meant to despise, a place ruled by the very man who had orchestrated the ruin of his life, was to be his gilded cage. James was an Omega, a noble one, raised in a world of hushed elegance and strict tradition. His life had been a carefully woven tapestry of diplomatic dinners, scent-masking etiquette, and the quiet understanding that his future, his scent, his very being, would one day be pledged to strengthen his family's alliances. He had accepted this fate with a quiet grace, as was expected of him. What he had not expected was for his family to be extinguished in a brutal, swift act of violence, leaving only him and his younger brother, Matteo, alive. Their survival, however, came at a cost. The price was James himself, offered as a token of surrender, a morbid peace offering to the rival clan, the Amos, led by the man responsible for the bloodshed, Lexus Amos. An alpha, a mafioso, a name whispered with fear and revulsion in James's former life. Accepting this pact felt like swallowing glass, each shard a memory of what he had lost. But looking at Matteo, his brother's eyes wide with a terror that mirrored his own, James knew he had no choice. Matteo, still too young to present, too fragile to navigate the treacherous currents of their new reality, needed protection. And Lexus Amos, the devil himself, had offered it, albeit with a possessive undertone that chilled James to the bone. The Amos compound was a stark contrast to his childhood home. Less ornate, more formidable. Security was paramount, visible in the armed guards patrolling the perimeter and the cold, assessing eyes of the staff. James was given a suite that was luxurious, undeniably, but felt like a prison cell draped in silk. He was a guest, yes, but a captive one. His first meeting with Lexus was a study in contained power. The alpha was not the brutish monster James had half expected. He was tall, with a lean, dangerous grace. His features were sharp, his eyes a startling, intelligent gray that seemed to pierce through James's carefully constructed facade of passive acceptance. His scent was potent, a dark, rich earthiness that spoke of dominance and unwavering control. It was a scent that should have repulsed James, a visceral reminder of his pain, but it also possessed an unnerving steadiness that, despite himself, James found grounding. James. Lexus's voice was a low rumble, devoid of warmth yet not unkind. Welcome to your new home. Home. The word felt like a mockery. James inclined his head, a gesture of forced respect. Signore Amos. Lexus watched him for a long moment, his gaze intense, searching. James felt a prickle of unease under the scrutiny, a vulnerability he hadn't anticipated. He was an Omega, yes, but he had been raised with a certain dignity, a sense of self-possession. This man, this alpha, seemed to strip it all away with a single look. There are terms to this arrangement, James, Lexus continued, his tone flat, businesslike. You are here as my betrothed. You will be treated with respect, and you and your brother will be safe. In return, you will offer your cooperation and loyalty to the Amos family. Loyalty to the family that had destroyed his own? James's stomach twisted. My loyalty lies with my brother's safety, he said, his voice quiet but firm. A flicker of something unreadable crossed Lexus's face. It might have been surprise or perhaps a grudging respect. Understood, he said simply. Your brother is under my protection. No harm will come to him while he is under my roof. This was the core of the arrangement, the fragile thread upon which James's compliance hung. Matteo's safety. It was the only thing that mattered. The first few weeks were a tense dance of avoidance and carefully orchestrated encounters. James kept to his suite, only emerging for meals, where he would sit in strained silence across from Lexus. The alpha rarely spoke, observing James with that unnerving intensity. James, in turn, studied the man he was bound to. He saw the way Lexus commanded respect, the absolute authority he wielded with a quiet confidence. He saw the subtle signs of stress, the lines around his eyes, the tension in his jaw, that hinted at the heavy burden he carried. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the initial fear James felt began to mingle with a hesitant curiosity. He observed how Lexus interacted with his people. He was demanding, yes, but fair. He was ruthless with enemies. James knew this all too well, but he was fiercely protective of those under his care. James witnessed small acts of unexpected kindness, Lexus personally ensuring Mateo had everything he needed, a quiet instruction to a guard to allow James access to the small, enclosed garden for fresh air. These small gestures chipped away at the monolithic image of the monster James had built in his mind. He still couldn't forget what Lexus had done, the lives he had taken. The grief remained a constant, dull ache in his chest. But the man who sat across from him at dinner, the man who signed documents with a focused intensity, the man who, one evening, simply pushed a plate of James's favorite pastries towards him without a word, didn't fit neatly into that box. Lexus, for his part, was captivated by James. Not in the immediate, possessive way alphas often were with omegas, but in a slow, unfolding fascination. He had expected defiance, tears, perhaps even an attempt at escape. Instead, he found a quiet strength, a dignity that refused to be extinguished. James moved through his days with a quiet grace, his eyes holding a sorrow that tugged at something within Lexus he hadn't known was there. He watched how James interacted with Mateo, the gentle touch, the soft words, the unwavering love that shone in his eyes when he looked at his brother. It was a devotion Lexus, whose own family ties were complex and often fraught with tension, found profoundly moving. He had taken James as a strategic move, a way to neutralize a rival clan and secure his own position. He had not anticipated the quiet storm of the Omega's presence in his life. He found himself wanting to understand James, to peel back the layers of grief and resentment and see the man beneath. He started leaving books he thought James might enjoy in the sitting room. He instructed the cook to prepare dishes from James's region. He created opportunities for them to be in the same space, not just at meals, but in the library, the garden, the music room. James noticed these things. He wasn't naive. He saw the subtle shifts in Lexus's demeanor, the way his gaze lingered, the careful neutrality of his tone when he addressed him. He didn't trust it entirely, couldn't allow himself to. The ghosts of his family stood between them, a silent, accusing presence. One afternoon, James was in the garden, tending to a small rose bush he had been given. The scent of the roses, sweet and pure, was a welcome respite from the heavier scents of the compound. Lexus found him there, standing a respectful distance away. "The roses are beautiful," Lexus said, his voice soft, almost hesitant. It was the most he had volunteered in a single sentence in weeks. James turned, a faint surprise on his face. "Thank you. They were a gift. Do you enjoy gardening?" I find it peaceful," James admitted. "It reminds me of home." The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken loss. Lexus's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability showing in his eyes. "I understand," he said quietly. "Loss is a heavy burden." James looked at him, truly looked at him, perhaps for the first time. He saw not the ruthless alpha who had brought about his ruin, but a man who carried his own burdens, his own scars. In that moment, the chasm between them seemed to narrow just a fraction. As the weeks bled into months, a fragile truce settled between them. They still didn't speak of the past, not directly. but they spoke of other things: books, music, the weather, the mundane details of their days. James learned about the complexities of Lexus's world, the constant vigilance required, the weight of responsibility he bore. He saw the glimpses of a sharp intellect, a shrewdness that was both formidable and, James had to admit, somewhat admirable. He also began to see the subtle ways Lexus protected him. A dismissive glance towards a guard who lingered too long, a quiet instruction to a servant about James's preferences, a silent presence at the edge of the garden while James was there. It wasn't overt, but it was constant. It was a different kind of protection than the one offered for Matteo. It was personal, attentive. James found himself relaxing, tentatively, in Lexus's presence. The constant fear began to recede, replaced by a cautious curiosity, and then a hesitant warmth. He noticed the small crinkles around Lexus's eyes when he was amused, the way his hands, so capable and strong, could be surprisingly gentle when he held a teacup. He even found himself anticipating their time together, the quiet companionship that had blossomed in the sterile environment of the compound. The shift in his feelings was slow, almost imperceptible at first. It was a gradual thawing of the ice around his heart. He still mourned his family, the pain a constant undercurrent. But the man who was now his promised alpha was not the monster of his initial perception. He was complex, layered, and, in his own way, undeniably devoted to James's safety and well-being. He realized, with a start, that he no longer flinched when Lexus's scent filled a room. Instead, he found a strange comfort in its presence, a sense of security he hadn't felt since before his world shattered. It was a dangerous realization, this softening towards the enemy, but it was also undeniable. The first time the physical tension between them became palpable was during a particularly late evening in the library. They had been discussing a complex political issue, a rare foray into the more serious aspects of Lexus's life that he usually shielded James from. James, surprisingly, had offered an insightful observation, drawing on the political education of his upbringing. Lexus had looked at him, his eyes alight with a sudden, intense appreciation. "You are wasted here, James," he said, his voice low and rough. James's breath hitched. The compliment, the raw intensity in Lexus's gaze, sent a jolt through him. He saw a hunger there, a possessiveness that was more than just strategic. It was something deeper, something primal. The air between them thickened, charged with an unspoken awareness. James's Omega instincts, long suppressed by grief and fear, stirred within him. His scent, usually carefully masked, grew subtly sweeter, a soft, involuntary response to the powerful alpha presence. Lexus inhaled sharply, his pupils dilating. He stood up, slowly, deliberately, and walked around the table, stopping before James. He didn't touch him, but his proximity was electric. James could feel the heat radiating from him, the sheer power of his presence. "James," Lexus said again, his voice a low growl that vibrated in James's chest. He reached out, his hand hovering just above James's cheekbone, hesitant. James should have pulled away. He should have reminded himself of the blood on this man's hands, of the life he had stolen. But he couldn't. He was frozen, caught in the intensity of the moment, in the confusing tangle of his own evolving emotions. He leaned into the almost touch, a silent invitation. Lexus's fingers finally brushed against his skin, warm and rough. He cupped James's face, his thumb gently stroking his cheekbone. His gaze was locked on James's, searching, questioning. "Are you afraid?" Lexus asked, his voice barely a whisper. James swallowed, the knot in his throat tight. He was afraid, yes, but not in the way he had been before. He was afraid of this new, terrifying attraction, of the possibility that he could feel something for the man who had been his enemy. Not of you, James admitted, the words a confession that surprised even himself. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched Lexus's lips. It was a rare sight, and it transformed his face, softening the hard lines and revealing a hidden depth. He leaned closer, his scent enveloping James, a comforting weight. "Good," he murmured, his breath warm against James's ear. "Because I don't want you to be afraid of me, James. Not anymore." He kissed him then, a tentative, questioning touch of lips that quickly deepened. It wasn't a kiss of passion, not yet. It was a kiss of exploration, of hesitant connection, of two souls cautiously navigating the treacherous waters of their shared history and uncertain future. James responded tentatively at first, then with a growing confidence. The kiss was a release, a breaking of the dam of suppressed emotions. Grief, fear, confusion. They were all there, swirling with the burgeoning warmth and attraction he felt for this complicated man. Their relationship shifted after that night. The tentative truce became a fragile connection, built on shared moments and a growing understanding. They spent more time together, talking, reading, simply existing in each other's space. Lexus continued to show James the quiet strength of his protection, and James began to see the loneliness that shadowed the powerful alpha, the heavy weight of leadership he carried. He started to understand that Lexus's actions, while brutal and unforgivable in their consequences, were born of a different kind of loyalty to his own clan, his own people. It didn't excuse the pain he had caused, but it offered a flicker of context, a hint of the man beneath the fearsome reputation. The love scene, when it finally came, was not a sudden, explosive event, but a natural progression of the emotional intimacy they had built. It happened organically, on an evening when the weight of their shared history felt less like a burden and more like a foundation. They were in James's suite, the air warm and soft. They had been talking, late into the night, about their pasts, about the lives they had lived before their worlds collided. James had spoken of his family, of the small, precious details he held on to. Lexus had listened, his hand covering James's on the sofa between them, his thumb gently stroking his skin. As James spoke, his voice thick with emotion, Lexus had simply looked at him, his gray eyes filled with a tenderness that made James's heart ache. He saw the depth of James's grief, the enduring love for his lost family, and his respect for the Omega grew even stronger. "You carry so much," Lexus murmured, his voice rough with emotion. James met his gaze, a silent acknowledgement of the pain that still lived within him. But there was something else in his eyes now too, a flicker of hope, a hesitant trust. Lexus leaned closer, bringing their foreheads together. His scent, usually a dominant force, was softer now, laced with a warmth that spoke of comfort and desire. "Let me carry some of it with you," Lexus said, his voice a vow. James closed his eyes, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He didn't need to hide his pain from this man anymore. Lexus gently kissed the tear away, a feather-light touch that sent shivers down James's spine. He then moved to James's lips, kissing him with a tenderness that was both heartbreaking and incredibly beautiful. This kiss was different from the first. It was slower, deeper, infused with the quiet understanding and burgeoning affection they had cultivated. It was a kiss that acknowledged the past while reaching for a future, a silent promise of solace and connection. James tangled his fingers in Lexus's hair, pulling him closer. He had fought against this attraction, against the confusing emotions that had blossomed in the sterile environment of his gilded cage. But he couldn't fight it anymore. He didn't want to. Lexus tasted of strength and something uniquely his own, The dark earthiness of his alpha scent mingled with a hint of something warmer, sweeter, something that felt like home. The kiss deepened, growing in intensity. Their bodies pressed together, a natural fit, a silent language spoken in touches and sighs. Lexus's hands moved to cup James's face, then traced the line of his jaw, his touch reverent. James arched into the touch, a soft sound escaping his lips. There were no rushed movements, no demands. Everything was slow, deliberate, guided by a mutual desire to cherish and be cherished. Clothes were shed slowly, reverently, each touch a new discovery. James's skin felt alive under Lexus's hands, sensitive to every brush, every caress. Lexus's scent filled the air, a potent aphrodisiac that stirred James's Omega instincts to life. He felt a deep, aching need to be claimed, to be marked by this man who had, against all odds, found a way into his heart. As Lexus entered him, slowly and with exquisite care, James cried out, not in pain, but in a release of emotion, a surrender to the overwhelming sensations that coursed through him. Lexus paused, his body still, his eyes searching James's. "James?" he whispered, his voice thick with concern. "It's okay," James breathed, tightening his grip on Lexus's shoulders. "It's okay." He pulled Lexus closer, urging him to continue. And Lexus did, moving with a steady rhythm that built slowly, exquisitely. James met his movements, their bodies finding a natural harmony. The physical act was intertwined with the emotional. Each thrust was a promise, each shared breath a confession. They were two broken pieces finding solace in each other, two lonely souls connecting in the most intimate way. James's scent blossomed, a sweet, heady fragrance that spoke of contentment and trust. Lexus inhaled it deeply, a low growl vibrating in his chest. He buried his face in James's neck, marking him with his scent, a silent claim that was both possessive and deeply reassuring. When the climax came, it was a wave of pure sensation, a release that left them breathless and trembling in each other's arms. James clung to Lexus, his face buried in the crook of his neck, inhaling his scent, feeling the steady beat of his heart against his own. Afterward, they lay entangled, the silence between them no longer strained, but comfortable, filled with the quiet hum of shared intimacy. Lexus held James close, his arm wrapped securely around his waist, his chin resting on his head. James felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. The grief for his family was still there, a part of him he would always carry, but it no longer consumed him. In the arms of the man who had been his enemy, he had found something unexpected, something real. He knew their future wouldn't be simple. The past still loomed, a shadow over their fragile connection. But for the first time since his world had shattered, James felt a flicker of hope, a belief that perhaps, just perhaps, healing and even love could be found in the most unexpected of places, even in the arms of the man promised to his enemy. The devotion Lexus had shown him, the protection he had offered, had slowly, painstakingly, cracked open the walls around James's heart. He was promised to the enemy, yes, but in that promise, he was beginning to find something akin to salvation. The journey of healing, of trust, of building a future on the ashes of the past, had just begun. And for the first time, James felt ready to face it with Lexus by his side.
I really hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, make sure to hit that like button. It helps others discover great stories too. And if you want to keep the adventure going, subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. Got any thoughts or something to add? Drop a comment below, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and until next time.